watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Tuesday Late Show with Teachers Talk Radio. We are joined by the lovely Heather and Claire. Our show tonight, we are going to be deep diving into SATs, most importantly the reading SATs paper and into reading in general. So we're going to talk about the importance of reading for success in all the SATs papers. We're going to do a 2024 roundup. So we're going to look back at the 2024 test and how pupils fared with it. And then we're going to start to prepare for the 2025 SATs. Before I introduce our lovely guests and where they are, where they come from, I just wanted to put in a little disclaimer that before the show, I had parents' evening and I came home and I tried to do the 2024 reading test. I'm going to refer back to my experience with the reading test a little bit later on. I will leave you on tenterhooks as to how it went. And so I wanted to introduce our guest. First, we have Heather March, who is next to me. I think she's next to me. Yes. Am I right? She's the Director of Teaching and Learning at Aim High Academy Trust. She's been an educator for 23 years, and some of her previous roles have been Assistant Head, English Lead, and of course a Year 6 class teacher. That's Heather. And then we also have Clair Freeman, who is joining us from Reading Plus. So she's the Senior Reading Development Consultant for Dreambox Reading Plus, formerly an educator for 20 years. And I believe your other current roles include Head of Research at Reading Solutions UK, and you're also a school governor. So welcome to both of you. Would you like to give us a little bio of yourselves, or did I cover it well enough? Heather, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think you covered that really well. The majority of my time in my career has been in Year 6. So I feel like talking about SATs is probably where I'm most comfortable. I started in Year 6 right back in 2006 after about 6 years in teaching. And so I remember the writing SATs and the science SATs. And so I've seen a lot of changes in the last 15 to 20 years with SATs. So, yeah. Yeah,
I must be honest, we used test base when I was in Year 6. And I looked at some of the science questions and I was like, what?
Just have to do so much revision for science. But, yeah, I still love test base.
Yeah, I love it. It's brilliant. Yeah, and then on to Claire, who comes to us from Reading Plus, our amazing website and resource that we're going to be talking about today. So Claire, did you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Maybe give us a little bio on Reading Plus?
Yeah, so I work with Reading Solutions UK, and we're the UK reseller of the software Reading Plus. So this is my 9th year with them now. And I came from teaching myself. I originally was secondary trained, and then after doing various roles and positions, leadership roles, I then supported schools to drive improvement through their subject specialisms, school specialisms, and then from that I moved into primary, so where I taught Year 5, 6 as a mixed class. So that was quite entertaining. So my last year in education was 2016, where we had that wonderful SATs paper. So lovely experiences with SATs there. And then I've been supporting our team around how they can support other staff and other schools around the development of reading in schools and how they can support the pupils to get the best outcomes from SATs.
So I think moving on from best outcomes for SATs, the reason we're here is to discuss Reading Plus. And if you are lucky enough to be listening in, or you're downloading it a bit later as a podcast, we do have a fabulous QR code for you, which is a 4-week free pilot of Reading Solutions. We're going to pop it up on the screen. You could take a photo of it. You can scan it right away. And as we're talking, please feel free to go to the website to have a look through all the wonderful resources they have. We are live, so if you have any questions, please feel free to put them to myself or to Heather or to Claire, and we will be happy to answer them, or we will try to answer them. But we will definitely pop them up on our screen and try to answer all your questions. So I think the best place to start, possibly maybe with yourself, Claire, is the history of SATs. You know, historically, how have you found SATs? The 2016 reading paper seems to come up a lot in conversation, and I know it was mentioned in the survey that you guys did on reading papers. Where do you think we've come from with SATs, and where are we going? How are we going forward with them?
I actually felt before the 2024 SAT, I actually felt like we were kind of moving in the right sort of direction. Certainly from 2016 onwards, there's been some positive changes. So there've been the tests. The text throughout the SATs paper have been kind of a little bit more chronological, where they're progressively getting more challenging. The ranges of genres and things are broadened as well to give lots of pupils different access. But I think last year, threw out quite a few curveballs for pupils. Some of the things that we do in Reading Solutions is we do look at the kind of Lexile ranges that we're testing with the pupils, and we see that vary from year 6 expected standards in terms of the Lexile range that children are reading up. But we've also seen other texts that have been year 10 or year 9 readability. So, you know, the kind of expectations that we're putting on our 11-year-olds is really quite phenomenal, really.
Yeah, and I believe that the software adapts with the child.
Oh yeah, Reading Plus adapts really, really well with the child. So it starts with a diagnostic assessment, which where we measure comprehension skills, vocabulary, and silent reading fluency. On a conversation I've been having with the school today, and we particularly talked about well-being for pupils. Another thing that the software assesses the pupils' self-perception of themselves as a reader, so how confident they are, what their belief is in self-improvement, and also their interest. So that's a really interesting thing to track, as much as the academic progress of a pupil. And then from that, it places the pupil into the correct journey for them, which is adaptive and informative and instructive, to assist them in a really personalised way.
I think it's so interesting that you said about the students' self-perception of themselves, because I feel like, you know, we are here to talk about SATs and reading, but in my opinion, as a teacher, I think personal, social, and all the PSHE skills come before all of those academic skills. And I think it's great that there's that extra kind of avenue to the program, because you get a lot of kids that don't want to read out loud, and it's like, well, why do they not want to read out loud, and how can we adapt that and give them the skills to make them confident to read out loud. So I think that's a great avenue of the program.
I think, just to interrupt, sorry to interrupt, Gillian, I mean, an awful lot of children, we have a perception as educators, we have a perception of what their confidence must be, because they might be a good reader or not a stronger reader, and it's quite fascinating when you actually dig into that data, because actually it can be absolutely on its head. An interesting quote I heard, a really interesting educator I heard decades ago in a conference, his name's Crichton Casbon. He talked about children reaching their sell-by date with a particular subject, and that really resonated with me, because, you know, sitting on the out-of-date shelf or the sell-by date shelf, and they get a perception that actually reading's not for them. It's no longer something that is intriguing for them. And I think starting to underpin that can really open up the doors to what their motivators are, and how we can engage them, re-engage them back into something they probably really did love when they were younger.
Yeah, you see that a lot, actually, don't you? You know, you walk into Key Stage 1 classrooms or reception classrooms, and there's a book corner, and it's cozy, and there's shelves with lovely colourful books and pillows and cushions, and I'm describing my book corner, and then you kind of, like, as you get higher up and you get into year 6, and like, it's a bookshelf,
Yeah.
Like you lose the coziness of reading, I think, when you go higher up. And I guess like Heather, as an educator and as someone going into like a few different schools, these are like barriers to enjoyment to reading.
Yeah.
If you don't enjoy reading, that's the first barrier to the reading paper, actually.
Absolutely. Huge. And it's that resilience, isn't it? And that if they haven't got that love of reading, and you have to work really hard to maintain that from key stage one, I completely agree. To maintain that excitement and enjoyment around reading, it is much harder, and you've got to really put things in place deliberately to make that happen. And what you were saying, Claire, about like motivators for reading as well with Reading Plus, I fully agree. We found that for Reading Plus, and as a mother of two boys who both used Reading Plus themselves, which is how I first came across Reading Plus. When my oldest, who's now doing A-levels, when he was in year 5, he came home with it, and I was like, this looks amazing. So I was English lead at the time, so I went about setting up the pilot, the free trial. Was absolutely hooked. I was in year 6 at the time as well, and it's something that I've replicated with the schools I work with now as well, as a way of really hooking and bringing back that enjoyment of reading. And my youngest, he did his SATs last year, and he used Reading Plus, so I've got a really good awareness of how it does hook and engage, because my boys are typical lost the pleasure, unfortunately. And it wasn't, I'd like to think it wasn't anything I did. They were always read to and had lovely bookshelves, but went through that kind of losing the love of reading and not wanting to read, whereas this was a gateway into really amazing texts. And it's something I can say really has hooked our older children in our primary schools.
I think also, like you say, key text is a really important part of it, because I think over the years, and I know also from a phonics standpoint, there's been schemes and there's been texts that have been put out, and they're not rich in language. The illustrations aren't engaging, and I think to have a program where it's sourcing amazing texts and engaging text, like that's not even half the battle, is it? That's like 90% of the battle.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's that vast choice that they can choose from, which really worked for my children and the children I've taught, and can see using it now as well. And really interesting topics that they then talk about in class as well.
Yeah. Well, we always know that reading affects writing.
It's absolutely.
Not a common barrier. It's like a side effect. It's like a good side effect, isn't it?
Gonna get great writing without great reading. Absolutely.
Yeah. Could I ask Heather, maybe Heather, from your point of view as the educator still in school now, and Claire from the reading solution side, how do you get teacher buy-in? Because it is technology based. And also parental buy-in. I know a few years ago we brought in another program which was very similar for maths, and there were some parents that were like, "I'm not using it. It's on a computer." So, for both, how do you get the adult buy-in, I guess?
Yeah, and teacher buy-in is sometimes really tricky. When I brought it into the junior school that I used to work in as English lead, it was brought in for everyone in year 4, 5, and 6, and I would monitor it and could see which classes and which teachers weren't using it the way it was recommended. And I've come across that in like my current role as well. And I think when you like pick it apart, it's because they don't fully understand it or get just how effective it is. And I think it's recognizing that it has to be used the way it's recommended, and it will have the results. Because so years ago, I was working with a year group, and it was just that kind of, I don't really say it too much. I was like, but you're not using it. You're just like dipping in and out of it. It's not going to work. It's not good. So I do a lot of training with staff as well who aren't familiar with it. So if there's a new member of staff to that year group using it, it's about sitting with them, showing them the educated tools. Because for me, it's not a program that you stick the children on and just let them get on. you need to log on and be watching what they do, so you can coach the children, you can drop in as they need it. You can use things like, it's got things like a leaderboard tool, which my kids used to absolutely love, and I would put it up every week. But I wouldn't just be looking at the amount of books read. I'd be looking at who's getting the best comprehension scores, who's increasing their words per minute. All of these things you can track. And it's about, if you don't have the enthusiastic teacher at the front, so you do have to work on that buy-in and just keep at it. So as an admin, if you can log in and see as well. So I would do that and then know who to go to. Because it's like any program, you can't just buy it and hope that it's going to sort itself out. So we found that by just lots of communication with the teachers, get them on board, and then if they're enthusiastic, it passes on to the children. And that's where it's really, really successful, when you've got year groups who see it as something exciting, and they get why you have to do what it asks you to do, otherwise you won't see the impact.
And I guess on your side, Claire, as like, I guess SLT buy-in, to put it that way, we do a lot of assessments in education, and over the years I found a lot of assessments to not be as helpful as the time it has taken to do them. I think assessments that we have at Reading Plus, where it is in the moment, it's individualized to the child, I guess that's a great selling point to SLT. Of they do it online, and straight away you get assessment data that you can straight away use for those children. And I think there's a lot of time in education where we're handing out test papers, get them back in, just mark them and put them in a cupboard. End of unit tests. I think we've all heard of them. We've all done them. We've all sat there marking them and then sticking them in a book. But this, to me, it seems, is usable straight away data for that teacher in the classroom, not for a spreadsheet on a computer. And for me, that kind of data is invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the teachers we work with as well, the last thing we want is the data. I've been in that situation where you've done a test for test sake, and it's so what data? It's not giving you anything unless you do anything with it. So Reading Plus, because the teacher gets in minute by minute information with how the pupils are performing in terms of some formative assessment, but as well as summative assessment. SLT are able to track everything as well, so it's really, really tangible for them to get the fingers on not only how well the pupils are using the software, but also where there could be some professional development needs potentially with teachers. So it's not just necessarily knowing exactly what's happening with each pupil, which is brilliant. It's having a really good picture right across a key stage to see where the ebbs and the flows are, and where there potentially could be some need for professional development. But like Heather said, it's only as good as its use, and it is a brilliant tool in terms of the kind of progress that we typically see. So in about usually in around about 6 weeks, you'll see a good school year's progress in terms of text complexity, and around 20 to 30 words a minute in terms of silent reading fluency gains, which is a teacher, that's absolutely phenomenal to see. So that kind of evidence of impact, which we have through all the different research that we've done, is often the thing that's the big hook for teachers and for senior leaders, and that's often when they're getting in touch with us. Usually by the time a school has purchased software, we've already got SLT buy-in. They're seeing the difference with the children in how they're using the software. They're seeing the children coming up to them saying, guess what, you'll never guess, we've read this. I've done this, I've got this, I'm at progress. And so children who you would never normally expect to see engage with the reading, normally those reluctant readers. The readers are readers, and they'll always read, and they could probably talk to you every single day about reading, but it's the change in those readers that make the big difference. And the thing for the teachers in their buy-in, when I was teaching, my first reaction when I first saw it was, it's not a book. There was and that's one of the biggest bits of kind of the barrier that we overcome. And I'm here to say that it's not about replacing books at all. But when children use Reading Plus, we're giving them adaptive instruction which is at the right level for them. and we're explicitly teaching them to read with good fluency, how to answer all of this different styles of questioning around the reading content domains. But really importantly, they're getting the opportunity to read really broadly and build their cultural capital and their life experiences through reading, so that they're not phased with anything else that they might be exposed to within the curriculum or within a testing experience. So when teachers see that, that's enough usually. I didn't expect it to do this for us, but it really has. So yeah, usually once teachers have seen it, they realise it's much more than just an online reading library. It's doing so much more for them.
And following on from what you just said there, Claire, actually think about governors as well. When we implemented it in one of our schools, one of our governors asked, was we talked about the implementation of it, asked that very, very valid question. Is this replacing books? So it was about making that really clear. No, it's just enhancing all the other things that are going on for Reading for Pleasure and how it complements it. It gives them that vast range that you can't get any other way. So it's to go alongside it, not to replace anything. And the governors came in and saw it in action, and straight away could recognise the benefits straight away.
Yeah. I think that's kind of that was my next kind of point, is that, you know, you've got governors involved, you've got kids getting excited and running maybe to other teachers who had taught them 2 years ago. I mean, you'll never believe. And so you have like teacher buy-in and you have child buy-in, but then you also have whole school buy-in, don't you?
Yeah.
And it seems like you really get that with the program.
Oh yeah, massively. So because you know, a few of us have been teachers, and we kind of see what kind of things would motivate the children within school to get whole school buy-in. So on our website, there's lots and lots of rewards that we have created that you can use in school, different posters and all the different things that you might want to use to promote reading for pleasure and reading itself, as well as the data and the leaderboards and all the different things that they're going to collect and get rewarded for on the software. So yeah, it's all built in. It's all built in.
And it's really easy to use as well. Once somebody sits down with you and shows you it, it's really accessible, because I'm not great with technology at all. It's not my favorite thing, but I can use that. And I can use all the areas on it really easily. So it is very, very user friendly.
And I just want to say, like, I think we have loads of people listening in. It sounds like an amazing piece of software. And I think that if you get a chance to have a try, really have a go at it. We have a QR code that you guys can use if you want to have a look through the resource tonight while we're chatting. And then you can pop some questions to us. We're happy to answer your questions live. The QR code will give you a 4-week free pilot of reading solutions. So, you know, you can test it out on a group of kids, or you can test it out on a whole class of year 6 children if you want to. So, yeah, we'll pop that up on the screen, and you can take a photo of it, or like I said, you can scan it straight away. So I think, yeah, that's kind of our chat into SATs and barriers of SATs. We are going to do our deep dive now. And I think we're going to start with going back again. What concerns did you have going into the 2024 SATs? Because I know my thought process with SATs has always been a bit mathematical, actually, in that it's three comprehensions, it's an hour, it's 20 minutes per comprehension. It's challenging, you know, like I said at the beginning of the show, I tried to do it. I gave myself half an hour to read it all. I read it in like much less than half an hour, but I found, like, as I went on, I was retaining less information about the texts I was reading. How do you address that concern?
When we're working with the children, and I certainly did as a year 6 teacher as well, break it up and do lots and lots of practice, but thinking of it in chunks of time. So the children going into it thinking, right, I'm going to allow myself about 20 minutes. And if usually the first extract is the easier one, but last year was the curveball with a non-fiction text at the beginning. But usually we would say to them, right, give yourself 20 minutes. If you can get through the first one of the questions and you're in under 20 minutes, you're ahead of the game, because then you bought yourself a bit of time for the next 2. But we also factor in rest breaks, because if children, you can give them rest breaks. You don't need to apply for any additional access arrangements for that. So for groups of our children who need that, typically it might be after 20 minutes, quick little movement break, put everything down, stop the timers, and think about it like that. Stamina and resilience has to be taught. And Reading Plus feeds into that in terms of building the stamina and the fluency. But right from September with my year sixes, if we were doing a practice, we would use the materials in that way or build it up. So give them a 20-minute section and what difficulties do they have with that? And what can we do to kind of overcome that as well? Because I think you're right, trying to read it all in one go, they can't retain it all. So try to get them to think, and they can annotate the booklet as well if they want. They can underline things in the booklet. So it's trying to teach them all of those skills and just breaking it down where possible. And things like Reading Plus, the style of the questioning and the extracts that they read, then linked to the questions, that all helps them develop those skills for tests. Because unfortunately, we don't want to say we're teaching them for a test, but you want to give them the skills to be able to access the test at the end of the day in a way where they're reading really good quality information. But you wouldn't be doing them any kind of service by throwing them in there, not helping them know how to scaffold and how they're going to break it down.
It's funny, Lianne, with you saying that you sat and did the 2024 SAT paper. I did some training with some of the guys that I work with in January, and I very cruelly made them sit a SAT. So they had an experience of what they were going to be speaking to schools about and what children were going to be experiencing. I think they found it a really, really valuable exercise. But leading into SATs, the three main things that we hear schools worrying about is the silent reading fluency and stamina and resilience. Being able to get through three large, but also have their maintaining their attention for a whole hour, because that's really, really tiring, particularly if pupils are not very fluent with their reading. There's an awful lot of excessive eye movements going on, which is tiring for the pupils. We also hear them saying how concerned they are around some of those higher order questioning skills that they have, and being able just to apply themselves in a test situation, but then also the ranges of genres and styles of text that they have exposure to because of potentially life-limiting experiences with a new fault of their own for their own cultural capital. So they're the main things that come up. But and Reading Plus, we support people and cater for all of those. So for people who haven't seen it, pupils will read a text through a guided window system. And this is designed to help take away the cognitive overload that children generally see when they're seeing a whole page of text. It calms everything down. It trains the ophthalmic muscles to move from left to right correctly and find the correct starting point again. It stops them over fixating on words and over decoding, so they're blending correctly and then looking towards the rest of the sentence for the meaning. It just generally calms everything down and enables them to free up working memory. So with this, pupils are then set little milestones to help increase their fluency while they're reading with good comprehension, to help them get to the speed that they need to be reading at for SATs, which is 185 words per minute, which is no mean feat. It's very, very challenging for the children. So that's one of the major scaffolds that we have. And when we talk about children not enjoying reading, often that is the main elements that are not enjoying, because it's so fragmented and disjointed, because their fluency isn't working right for them. Once we correct that, that's when you see the really rapid gains, because they started to understand the text much more successfully. So those are the key things that we're hearing schools say to us before SAT.
Yeah, because we find them, the majority of the children, when we first baseline them or put them onto Reading Plus in year 5, are nowhere near that level of reading speed. Because that's a really difficult thing to teach. Reading speed, to read more quickly, really, really difficult. You've just got to be reading a lot, haven't you, to get that fluency. So yeah, that's a big one. That when you see the words per minute going up, you see the effect that it has on their confidence is huge.
Yeah, and I think, it's kind of like this is the barrier between, let's give them a test paper where, like you said, Heather, you can annotate. And I taught it the exact same way. So I'm thinking for Claire, when you mentioned the guided window, and I must be honest, when I did the reading test this evening, I got to the last piece of text, which was quite a lengthy, they were all 2 pages, but there were big paragraphs.
And
I scrolled to the end of the PDF to see if I was near the end. But I think it's like we have to teach them to read, but then we also have to teach them how to read.
Yeah.
And it's the same with English. It's like, especially in the young years, I come to the understanding that you have to teach them how to think in order to be a writer. And I think it's the same with the reading. Unfortunately, there are test skills that they need, and we want them to be successful and feel successful. So unfortunately, I think at some point you do teach some sort of test skill, but I think you also have to teach them how to read. And Claire, it seems like the guided window is one of the tools of Reading Plus that helps with that. What about annotating and being able to, I guess, make the text your own brain page kind of thing?
In the SATs paper or on Reading Plus?
Or Reading Plus, to be able to, make your own notes, or I guess make it work for you.
They could make their own notes on paper as they're going through if they wanted to, but it's developed in a way so they're not reading massive chunks of text without having break pages. So they're generally, what the software is designed to do is gradually build up that stamina. So they're building their capacity and being able to read greater quantities of text has become more and more successful. So they might only be reading 200 words or a couple of pages, and then there's kind of a break page. For earlier on the software, the questions will be woven in and out of the text, so that it's not left to the end, so it's not just like a memory test for them. So there's lots of scaffolds to help them develop that, so they shouldn't really need to be making notes. They also have access to be able to go back to the text, so a reread button as well, so they're not necessarily needing to just kind of make a mental note of it and remember it. So they do have those skills that we're teaching them to do, go back and source the answer. It's not about just relying on your memory, which I think is absolutely essential.
And I think that part you've talked about there really helps them, because when we're working with them on reading the text but having the questions, I always say to them, have the text and the questions alongside each other.
I agree, yes.
So that you can get a gist. Some of them even like this, skim or scan the first couple of questions, so the questions are in their heads. But the Reading Plus does that really well in terms of like reading a bit, looking at a question, but it'll take them back to the specific part they need to reread. So it's training them those skimming and scanning skills as well, which really helps them when they have to kind of, it's that cognitive overload again, isn't it? But training them to be able to like go between the two and to make those links. So I think that feeds in really well.
It's even also training them of how to lay out their desk, actually.
Yeah.
Because you get to something, it's like, here's a massive A4 booklet and here's another one. It's like, what do I do? A lot of these classes, they have these like little desks, don't they?
Yeah.
Like Victorian era.
Yeah.
And that's how I had my last time in year 6, like Victorian era desk, lifted up, that kind of thing.
I used to.
For a mise en place, like we're in a kitchen and you need to have like a mise en place of your desk. So I feel like, for that, the way it's laid out is also incredibly helpful.
Yeah, just the logistics of organising yourself, isn't it, and your equipment and all of that.
It's so interesting, Claire, what you were saying about those break pages, because I think back to the year 2 SATs, and actually the year 2 paper 1, that's how it's laid out.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it's laid out, and it just makes more sense. And even I think when you would teach a reading lesson in class, that is how you would teach it. You go you go bit by bit, don't you? You don't, especially like you wouldn't read a whole book and then be like, right, I'm going to ask you questions about chapter 2.
And actually the texts are all broken down, and the whole lesson should be complete within a 10 to 15 minute slot. So it's not about reading a really long text, which might take them weeks and weeks to read, and actually you've got no measure of whether they're reading those texts or not, or understanding them, or whether they're coping with those texts. So it's in manageable chunks, and we're gradually increasing the capacity to be able to read much greater quantities in the same amount of time. And I know, Heather, when we've talked about pupils in year 6 preparing for SATs, and I know certainly when I was teaching year 6, I never did this, had children try, unless they were doing a test, try doing 3 comprehension exercises in a row.
Yeah. They'd read the whole booklet. I think I remember that when I first started in year 6. I think that's kind of the way we did it. We just gave it to them and they would just read the whole thing.
Yeah, and they'd never ever tried doing all that in one sitting.
Yeah.
Getting practice at doing that, building their resilience. So things on Reading Plus, we encourage children to do 2 comprehension lessons, one after the other. But in year 6, you might want to build 3 into that on one of the sessions, just so they're building that stamina and resilience. And
you do see how that's like really built upon bit by bit, because when you get children in year 6 who are really further up the levels in Reading Plus, I know my son, for example, as well, last year got to a level where he was reading a significantly greater amount, and he'd be like, "But I've got to read loads now." I'm like, but your reading speed's gone up, so that's the right level of challenge. And so it pushes them progressively bit by bit, so they can always access it and they're always successful, but eventually they're reading far greater quantities, but with the same level of success, because it hasn't let them move on until they're successful.
And I think that whole to build upon bit by bit, and Claire, as you said, to in year 6 have it where it's like there's break pages and there's guide windows, but also you can then do one comp and then another comp. Because I found when I did the one this evening that it was like I would read the first text, which in last year was non-fiction, and also it was about an animal that I've never heard of, and I was thinking
most of the country hadn't either.
That was the worst thing about it.
There's going to be some kids that are sitting there for an hour being like, "What is that animal? I've never heard of it before." Half an hour is going to pass, and they'll still be trying to figure out what the animal is.
That's
and then
exactly what.
Any questions?
Yeah, a lot of hours were totally thrown by that. Like, what is a tenrec? And I was thinking, afterwards I googled it. I was like, I've never heard of one of those. But you're right. I think because they're expecting a story at the beginning, because we've told them it'll start with a nice story, it'll start with a nice narrative. Yeah. But you're right. I think a lot of them were like, I don't know what a tenrec is. So they were thrown straight away.
And quite a complex informational text, scientific informational text on the first one. I thought,
it was very heavy.
Really, I think most of the time we're kind of priming the children to expect that maybe on the second text as first one's a warm up, which is why I feel like we've gone backwards a little bit in how we've been administering the tests.
I think it's important, like you say, that we have the software where you can build upon bit by bit with Reading Plus, because you get to the comprehension text and it's like, right, here's a story. Okay, great. And then there's a non-fiction. Okay, great. And then there's a poem or some kind of other text. And even for me, I read the story and I was like, and it just ended. But it didn't end. It was just like, this is the end of the extract. Yeah. And I was a bit like, I wanted to read the rest of the story. And I bet you have kids as well that have that mindset of, I want to carry on the story. Yeah. And I think that's a skill as well, Claire, where you say with Reading Plus, you can kind of block up reading comprehensions, where you can teach the skill. Okay, we're going to do this one. Great. And let's move on to the next one, because I think that's also a skill that you need to teach the children as well to prepare them to go from the end of a text straight into the beginning of another text.
Yeah, definitely. But after answering some quite complex questions as well.
Exactly. To kind of have the mindset to be able to, Heather, to leave that behind and move on to the next one.
You're still thinking about the tenrec. And you've got
exactly. And what it is, and do they have one in London Zoo?
It's the most Googled word last May, wasn't it?
2024 most Googled animal. by English 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
So Reading Solutions did a survey actually, and I kind of wanted to talk about some of the data that was found. So 33% said the paper was harder in comparison, and 48% said it was about the same. However, it is believed that last year's reading paper was the hardest since 2016. There's that 2016 paper rearing its head again. 42% said the texts were more complex, and I agree. Like, we were joking about the animal one, but there was a lot of vocabulary in there that was very scientific. And again, some kids are going to get stuck on some of those. I don't even remember what the word was. It was like the way they communicate, I think.
Manipulation. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's kids that are going to get like stuck on that, I think.
Yeah.
Fixated on that. I agree. There was some very complex vocabulary, and I think the last percentage is 46% found the text less relatable in regards to cultural capital. And there's always a non-fiction one, and I agree. It might, to look at it from two different points of view. That the animal one in a science lesson, a geography lesson, amazing, really interesting. But for a reading comprehension, it's nothing to do with the children. They're not really going to relate to it, and I think that makes it a lot harder. Did you guys adapt anyway, Claire, after you kind of did that survey? And yeah.
No, if anything, it kind of reinforced how we work, because one of the things that we really talk about often is the connectedness with the curriculum, but also the connectedness with the cross-curricular matter. So all of the texts on Reading Plus are, there's a whole range of genres to choose from, but they are all cross-curricular, so that we want to be encouraging the children to read as broadly and widely as possible, so that we're not going to get into the situation where they are fixated on one particular genre and they're only successful in that genre. So there is a really good breadth of texts on the software which are non-fiction, which a lot of the children, and I think, Heather, we've mentioned this before, that the children who've had exposure of texts which are non-fiction, informational style texts with quite a scientific into it, with really complex vocabulary, tier 3 vocabulary, then they've actually worked very, very well, and they've come out quite well on the SATs as a result.
Absolutely, yeah. I totally agree, because it's the fact that they read so widely on there, and the vast majority of the children who perhaps have been reluctant readers tend to then suddenly find their interest in the non-fiction texts that are available. So when I was in year 6, I'd often be teaching a science lesson or a history lesson, and I wish I could remember the specific examples, but sometimes someone put the hand up and go, on Reading Plus, I read about such and such. I read about this person, they invented that, or and making links. There was loads in the World War II topic I used to teach, where children would be making links between texts they'd read. And what you said about vocabulary there, massive, because they come across so many unfamiliar tier 3 words on Reading Plus, because they have to be prepared in the SATs paper. There are going to be tricky words in there that they haven't come across before. So it's how they learn those skills to read round them, or to have more exposure to a greater variety of words. But it's got a huge impact in terms of that, getting children reading lots of non-fiction across the curriculum that I don't think you could replicate in any other way.
And this is that passion for reading, and that awe and enthusiasm, which again you can't really teach.
No,
I think you can provide children, I'm very big on this, with experiences, but awe and wonder kind of has to come from within. And that isn't that amazing that you've got the great data, you've got assessment that moves with the child, but then you also have those moments where you're in a science lesson and the child's like, oh, when I was doing my Reading Plus I read about this. Amazing.
And it just starts to come up in conversation.
Like a natural cross.
There was a text my son read last year. It was about Harvey Milk, and we were doing an assembly on him at one of my schools. And Thomas, my son, had found this doing his Reading Plus. And I was like, oh, that's who this school's doing some work on him. And I was like, oh, I'll have to read that, because it'll link. And there's just loads of great diverse texts on there as well, about diverse characters in history and in current day. So they're getting, it's that inclusivity and diversity element as well that they get, which I'm really like passionate about as well in school, that they need to come across a wider range of influential characters, and it does that really well too.
Yeah, it very much does. And one of the things that I'm really proud of with the software is that, you know, if there's kind of particular global themes such as, you know, Black History Month, things like that, or International Women's Day, they'll infiltrate the software with texts that are relatable to that. So, you know, as a teacher, you know, for me, if I was delivering reading to 30 children in one go, trying to make it differentiated for every single individual is a challenge. Whereas Reading Plus has, you know, all the levels available to the children. So they're all reading something which is completely differentiated. But as a teacher, you have text that you can draw on that could exemplify a topic within your curriculum as well, without you having to go and source it elsewhere. So you've got lots and lots of things that you can use software for, not just the independent work that the pupils will do.
Yeah, and I think there's that like the book corner, and then like the online library of text that you must have on there. And while there is always room for a book corner, you would never get the amount of books that I'm sure you can get on an online resource such as Reading Plus. And I think that's a massive selling point as well, is that you have a massive scope of text that you can use, that would hopefully you could find one that engages all the kids in your class, even the reluctant readers.
But actually also exactly the right readability for that pupil as well, which is the challenging thing. A lot of people, you know, schools going through their libraries trying to make sure it's all the texts are appropriately levelled, whereas on with Reading Plus it's done for them.
I also wanted to just mention, kind of before we move on to our next part, is that one of the comments was that there was too many inferencing questions in the 2024. And I actually think when I did it, the first question on the second text was inferencing. And even I was a bit thrown by it, because I was like, wow, the first question's an inferencing question? That's difficult. So the fact that the software and the program moves with the child and provides the child with the type of questioning that they need, it's very hard for a teacher to replicate that for 30 children on the spot, or even in a PPA time. I think that it would be very, very time consuming. And I think that's invaluable as a part of the program, Claire.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure, Heather, you can talk about how you've used this element, but the program does question level analysis on how the children are performing in relation to the Key Stage 2 reading content domains. And sitting behind that data, which you can be, you know, tracking after you've done some intervention, you can see the impact a couple of weeks later on. But sitting behind that data, there's lots of different resources for teachers to be able to tap into and use for either small group intervention. It could be worksheets that they send home for homework, or it could be a starter activity around some Vipers work or something like that they might be focusing on that week. How have you used that?
Yeah, so we have, as well as Reading Plus, as I was saying, you know, before, like the reading curriculum is massive, and Reading Plus is like part of it, which supplements everything else as well. So in reading lessons, teachers will explicitly model and demonstrate how to answer a retrieval question, how to answer an inference question. But alongside that, they can look at the data from Reading Plus and look at the content domains that children are struggling with the most, like Claire said, and think, well, so that's the kind of phrasing I need to use in my questioning. So drawing on practice papers and also Reading Plus data to make sure that you're kind of hitting everything they need. But with Reading Plus, it's that like kind of one click, you can see the content domains and what they're struggling with. Whereas obviously with the practice papers, you need to go through that more with a fine-tooth comb. But we kind of advise, but it's kind of drawn on both, but certainly looking at which content domains you need to focus on. And like you say, inference, it's always really heavy on the inference. But again, through Reading Plus, they're going to get that practice answering those types of questions on a regular basis. If you're doing it as it's recommended, then a few times a week, they're exposed to those kinds of questions. So then they're more confident when they come to those questions.
Could I ask, do you agree with to both of you. Do you agree with the thought that this was one of the harder papers?
I thought 2023 was pretty tricky as well. Our year 6 teachers felt that 2023 and 2024 were fairly on par overall, but the ordering of the text that we talked about before added that extra element of almost like trying to trip them up a little bit and trick them. So with that element added in, I think it threw quite a few, because I think a lot of the children did take a bit longer on that first extract than we would have liked. Just seemed to take a little bit longer than the 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think in terms of overall, they were probably quite similar. In terms of the complexity, I think it will have been the initial text, which will have been quite a shock to the system. But in terms of number of words across the paper, they were both very, literally there was only a few words different, really, 20 words different from one to the other. From 2023 is significantly higher than 2022. 2022 there was only about 1,500 words. 2018 again only about 1,500 words. So we have been gradually increasing, but I think, and in terms of the challenges around the reading content, I mean, again, it was a similar marking scheme, really. But I think for me, it's been the complexity of the vocabulary, which didn't really resonate with a lot of children, and the sequence in the ordering of the text.
And before we kind of go into your tips for going forward with the 2025 SATs, I mean, if you had the job of writing the 2025 reading paper, how would you adapt it, I guess, from the 2024? And does it need adapting? Which parts of it do you think can be more, I guess, relevant to the children of today? I think that's an important question, to make it relevant for these kids.
I think that's a big one. Not deliberately trying to pick things that they've probably never heard of or experienced. The 10 and 11-year-old children.
Yeah.
And it's a bit unfair.
Good.
So I feel like context should be looked at. I do also think that an hour is hard, because we're talking about resilience and stamina there, and my goodness, they do a great job, and we'll get them there, and year 6 teachers get them there, which is fantastic. But most of the children I speak to still kind of dread the reading paper the most, even as a practice, because it's like that pressure of getting through all of that in an hour. So could it be 2 shorter papers? Could it be broken up, 2 extracts one day, an extract another day? I do feel. But then when you look at something like the SPAG paper, the children always seem to have more than enough time to get through that.
Just fly through it.
With time left over.
Yeah.
If they've been taught well and they know everything in the SPAG paper, it's fairer in terms of timing. So I would change the timing in the context.
They don't seem on par. Like the spelling, I think, is hard, but the grammar paper, it's a lot of multiple choice. It's a lot of draw the line, match the line. And then I looked at the plan of the week for SATs, and generally the grammar is Monday and the reading is Tuesday. And I think a few times has it been like the week after half term? Is that right?
Or just a week or two. And I think this time I think there's only a fortnight after a holiday this time as well.
Yeah. So I think that, like you say, Heather, when I look at them as like visual representations, the reading paper is heavy.
Yeah.
Because yes, there are 3 maths papers, but the first one is arithmetic. I always find like arithmetic is, if you know the methods, you're fine.
If you teach them to know the methods, it's going to be the same questions, just with different numbers every time.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's something that's really can be predictable. They're going to be doing lots and lots of arithmetic practice, and
you know the questions.
The reading paper, we just anything.
The reading and the reasoning papers, and the reasoning paper relies a lot on the reading as well. So
absolutely, is seriously impacted by reading.
Inference in the reasoning papers to try and figure out what actually they're asking is another tricky skill.
But I think that was one of the downfalls last year on the reasoning paper, wasn't it? An awful lot of the children. The mathematical element of the paper wasn't that challenging. It was the complexity of what they were asked to do, understanding the influence behind it as well.
And I think actually going forward, would kind of be to ask. I agree with you. I think that you need comprehension for maths, and I think going forward is also how do we get the maths comprehension out of the reading skills, Claire. How do we make that link across those comprehension subjects, I guess? I think the skill is the same, I would imagine. So, you're like Reading Plus is teaching those skills along the way. And you would hope that if those skills are embedded, then they can use them across a range of subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's even in the reading, getting exposure to the ranges of questioning styles. That in itself, just practicing and being able to recognise. I know we've talked about this, Heather. Being able to recognise, this is an inference question, or this is a retrieval question. Almost labelling the type of question they're going to get. Again, something with maths. This is this type of question. This is that kind of. This is the skill I'm being asked to do here. Will really help. And I think certainly for Reading Plus, because they get an exposure with everything so frequently, that will really, really help.
It does. Yeah, it does help.
I kind of wanted to leave, we have loads of people listening in, so thank you if you've listened in. We do have a fabulous QR code that will pop up on the screen. You get a 4-week free trial on Reading Plus, so please have a go at it. And I guess my final question would be, if I start with Claire, going forward, we have a few months now until the SATs papers come out, until we have SATs week. Claire, what would your advice be to people that have Reading Plus, or to the people that are going to have a go on the free trial with the QR code, of how do you get the best out of it for your children? What's the best way to use it? What's the most effective way?
So if you haven't got it, it would be great to have a conversation with you so we could set it up for you, so we can really enable your children to get the best possible outcomes when they come to SATs. But we know it's not all about SAT, it's about their reading journey all the way through their education, and also through to adulthood as well, into their careers. But so many children are starting secondary school, usually around 33% are starting secondary school who are not at expected standards for reading, and that's only going to continue to grow. So kind of putting SATs aside for 1 minute, it'd be really lovely to have everybody leaving primary school with a meeting expected standards, so they can make it through the rest of their career. But for me, in terms of SATs, silent reading fluency, if you are able to come and have a chat with us, and we can look at how we can support that silent reading fluency. It's so difficult for you to do as a teacher, to enable every pupil to be reading with good fluency, whereas the software is going to help the children do that independently. You're going to see the biggest transformation with that leading into SATs in just the few months that we've got left. But the other areas that they're really going to get some good exposure to is the ranges of genres, so they're not feeling threatened if they're reading a piece of text like a TENREC, which they've never encountered before. They'll have the resilience and the confidence to be able to tackle that vocabulary without necessarily knowing what every word is. So those are the two things I would say would be really beneficial to get in touch with.
And then to you, Heather, what advice could we give to the amazing number of teachers and educators that have been listening in, of how to prepare for SATs and how to utilize Reading Plus in a classroom setting, in a whole school setting?
For us, for the biggest success story we've seen in terms of impact for SATs is in the school where we've implemented Reading Plus in year 5. So last year's year 6 had it from year 5 into year 6, and the reading results were the highest they've been in many years. So there was over 83% of children got expected or greater. And these were children who had obviously missed a lot of year 2 and year 3. And when they were in year 4, they were a huge concern to us. We were looking at like 40-50% of children where they should be. But the biggest thing for us, which has just been a game changer, is that 94% of the disadvantaged pupils last year got expected or above in reading, and that has been our like light bulb moment in terms of they're getting something really special. In terms of and what Claire said about secondary school, yes, we're getting them ready for SATs, but actually you want them to go to secondary school and to be able to read in science and history and geography and RE with confidence. You want them to be reading extracts and sections of books, and it's a skill that they need. So, but thinking about now, from now until May, if you've already got Reading Plus or you haven't, I'd be certainly making sure it's implemented the way it's meant to be. So as I think I mentioned earlier on, if it's used the way it's meant to be used, the gains will be rapid, and really keeping an eye on it as a teacher. But also any practice test materials that are being used now, doing loads of gap analysis and teaching what they need, and really revisiting the skills. It's all about that formative assessment, isn't it, as well as the summative assessment, but having a really good handle on what they need, so you're teaching the right things at the right time. And trying to make it fun as well, low stakes quizzing, put some Kahoots in there. And I used to always do test papers like you've just done tonight, but I would want to make deliberate mistakes. Do some maths papers, get some questions wrong, and they love nothing more than marking your test paper. And then pointing out to them that, well, if you've been able to correct all my paper, then you can complete a SATs test and get it all right. So just trying to, between now and then, mix it up with lots of different activities as well, because it is about their well-being and their resilience too, isn't it? And preparing them for the next stages in their education.
And I mean, I totally agree. It's been one of my swan songs that, we teach a lot in primary and we teach a lot in high school, but reading is a life skill. And there's not a lot of other life skills that I think we teach in education. There's the personal, social, but that also has to come from home. But I think reading and reading comprehension is a life skill, and it's something that you need to be able to function really in real life, never mind in school. So I think that coupled with real life in the moment data is just so valuable as a tool to have in your classroom.
And what it's like, what it's done for our disadvantaged pupils who don't get that rich reading diet, the fact that they outperformed for the first time, it was like, what's going on? It was a really lovely, this is fantastic. So I think there was only one or two of our disadvantaged pupils who didn't, but they had significant SEND needs as well, and more complex needs.
I was saying that with Heather just before, that absolutely matched one of our recent research studies that we did in partnership with Derby Research School and Spencer Academies Trust, where our disadvantaged children made 3 times the progress of those really interesting plus. So but they leapfrogged their peers. It's
amazing.
It's really, really interesting that,
you're opening worlds for some of these children that they probably have never been into these worlds before.
It's definitely got to be something around that, because it was a real anomaly, a nice anomaly on the day to be able to say to governors, 94% of disadvantaged pupils have left us to go into secondary school reading at or above expectations. And they'd had it from year 5, so we feel that was a model that worked.
You feel the impact, and these were children that were impacted by COVID.
Yes, so these were our worry cohort, like our real significant concern.
To overcome that hurdle, is a massive milestone, I think. Sorry, Claire, did you want to?
I was just about to say that, we're talking about SATs in terms of working with year 6 children and year 5 children, upper key stage 2, but actually SATs is a whole key stage initiative, so starting from year 3 upwards. So Reading Plus, it starts with a readability from pupils who have at least phonemic awareness, so year 2 readability roughly. So a lot of schools we do work with start using Reading Plus from year 2 right through to year 6, and it supports not just your struggling readers, but stretching those into greater depth as well. So some schools have different challenges, and it might be just stretching those extra ones into the next boundary. So just thinking about it slightly differently sometimes.
I can see how that would be a benefit. Most of ours, when they do their baselines in year 5, aren't reading at the speed they need to be. So then they have to do like that quick catch up. So I can see how putting it in lower down would give them that head start.
And I think it's really interesting, and it's probably a good point to kind of conclude on and to round the show up, is that we've talked about SATs for about an hour and we've talked about year 6 reading papers. But I totally agree, Claire, because I think reception in year 1 is very like phonics based, like phonics. And then I think, after kind of year 2, sometimes we're a bit lost in the world of reading. And how to broach it with year 2 and up, because we're like, okay, they've learnt to read, so just go pick a book and read now. From the go to the library, pick a book and read. Okay, you're on chapter books, off you go. But actually, we still need to guide them through those reading years of their lives, and I think Reading Plus does that, and I think it's very important to have a guide next to you, as you would in reception in year 1, let's say with the phonics programs. So I think it's still important to have that guide kind of scaffolding you a little bit. And I believe that Reading Plus does that.
Yeah, and so many schools these days are struggling with the amount of the capacity of their staff and having enough TAs to be able to listen to every child read every week. And, it's a way of being able to make sure that a child has had one-to-one input, I suppose. Software.
You're right, actually. And one of my colleagues said to me the other day, actually, how do I hear everybody read? And it's difficult.
It's really, really difficult.
It's difficult. Whereas with a program like Reading Plus, you're not hearing them read, but you're knowing the end point of them reading, kind of thing. I think that's a good way to look at it.
I think it's you're not leaving it to chance.
Yeah.
And hoping that because like you were saying, when they get year 2 and off you go, you're on chapter books. There's an element of hoping that they are reading.
Not Harry Potter, a different chapter book.
They're actually taking it. Yeah, sometimes you would know the children who you're like, are you just flicking pages? Yeah. Are you actually reading the book? Yeah. And the students find out with Reading Plus that you can't cheat Reading Plus.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
I agree.
You get the children who maybe are the very disengaged readers at first, who go on to the program and they think, I'm just gonna I'm gonna sit and realize can't do that. Teachers are learned and everything freezes and they can't. It's not left to chance.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to say thank you to both of you for joining me and for discussing it. I think SATs are always a massive discussion in schools, and I think reading is also a huge discussion point in schools. We know with Ofsted, reading deep dives were a massive thing that were brought in. So I think it's good to have a guide next to you in your reading process as you teach, like you say, Claire, from 3 all the way up to 6, 2 all the way up to 6, really. I think it's a great guide and a great scaffold and then a great teacher's assistant actually to have in your classroom. So I just want to say thank you very much. Also that you guys have a series that people can watch on Reading Solutions UK's website. You can also read the Reading Solution UK SAT survey on their website, so you know that you're not alone in what you thought of the 2024 SATs. I'm sure there's some year 6 teachers listening, and I think teaching can be a bit of a lonely job when you're standing at the front by yourself and you're thinking to yourself, gosh, did the other year 6 teachers think the same as I do? And I think a survey like the one we've discussed tonight will hopefully give you a little bit of rest assured that other teachers are out there and we are feeling the same way. And to have a resource like Reading Plus next to you in your classroom is a great support that will hopefully get you to SATs and through SATs, and also get your children successfully reading from year 2 up all the way up into year 6. So I just want to say thank you very much. And here's our QR code for one last time. So have a scan of it, take a snapshot of it, show it to your teachers. Hopefully we can put some socials up on the website. I'm not sure if we can get our admin from behind the scenes to put some socials up, hopefully for Reading Solutions UK. If not, again, one more time, we have our QR code, which you are more than welcome to scan. So thank you, Heather, and thank you, Claire, for coming on and for having a chat with us. It's been really lovely, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lianne.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.